talk through. This particular experience is a collaborative and participatory experience. You can paint a lantern, and then at the end of your work, you can drop a lantern in a virtual lake. Everything happens in virtual reality. And this is me about to drop it. And this is made by HTC Vive. I was wearing a goggle while I was painting. This is what I was seeing in my goggle. So on the background, there are lanterns painted by other people before me. This is called a persistent experience. And as I drop my lantern, this particular lantern will persist on the virtual lake, along with other artists' work. That's that. So the second one is about the reusability of something you created. So we thought it would be interesting to do a little piece for Halloween. So this is me painting drifting pumpkin. And as you can see, the background of the music and the color can give you very different creative intention.
I just wanted to see this.
And we installed this in Pacific Science Center for their Halloween party. People were having a lot of fun. I'm going to just stop here. You can stop by after talk. I can show you more. This is just for you to understand what is VR and what is the possibility of VR and how art can become part of the VR ecosystem.
Hi, okay, because of the clunkiness of showing clips, we're showing them ahead instead of jumping while we talk, so we're giving some language. So my name's Sandy, and currently my art collective and I have been working, we're called Fearless. We've been working with a group called the Be Another Lab, which is out of Barcelona and now close to, I think, 22 cities in the world. Let's see, if I just downloaded it. Where did it go? Shoot. Sorry, everybody. Hold on a second. The clunkiness of it is even worse when you don't have glasses on. I think the window got closed. Here we go. All right, well, I'll show this one first. Okay, so this is from a project that just came out. It is an augmented reality project, and I'll just show the clip before I say very much about it. Sorry, my desktop got a little funky here somehow. It's a very big file, and apparently it did not reload again. Sorry about that. See up there, having some love. And I'm on the staff Wi-Fi. Oh, I'm on the river! I accidentally just stole the riveter's Wi-Fi. Okay, hold on. That's a total accident. Okay, now it's getting a little bit crazy. There we go. Yay. Oh man. It's great when you have your videos queued up, like I did. to skip both of these and just say very quickly, later when you have some time, I want you to check out, there's a project, several projects right now going on in different cities that have a variety of uses of mixed reality in terms of either the oral history and pictorial history of the city, or some, very few, but some are a little bit about imagination of the future. So we'll come back to that later. So remember that. And then we're not gonna have time for that either. So we'll skip to this part, which is an extraordinary project. This article in The Atlantic is totally worth your time about a rebuild of 1920s Harlem in VR. It's an incredible project. I don't even know where that's coming from. That audio. We'll leave that. And see if I can find the one other clip I was going to show you that got lost somehow here. Yeah, that is exactly what my head looks like. Here we go. I know another way to find it. Okay. Here we go. This video is opening in the wrong program. This video is from the project that the group I was telling you about from Barcelona. So for anyone who's unfamiliar, you may be familiar with this project by now. This has been going on for quite a while. These artists over 10 years ago, as some of you probably know, because this is a very astute audience, near-field vision devices of a variety of kinds have been made, and the promise of them has been extolled for decades. And there are obviously great advances in the tech, and whether you're discussing what's called virtual reality, in which you are inside an entirely manufactured world, or any world that is mixed reality, those promises have included many traits of ourselves that we considered the possibility that we would evolve. So to pick up on Aaron in our last talk, what he said about evolution is where I wanted to start today. When John asked to speak about what's going on in VR, AR, and MR, well, since I knew someone from HTC is here and an artist who's making work every day, I thought I would go like I like to a little meta and say, sadly, we're at sort of a 3 to 4 year tail end of what has been another period of a lot of promise of what would be made in these technologies. And while there has been extraordinary work done, some of which I want to show because I think it inspires, there has also really been a terrible, paltry amount of real investment in what is entirely new language and a massively important paradigm. And so what I'm going to show you right now is work that I've come to really believe in because it's using the elements of head-mounted device or head-mounted experiences as an in-out device, meaning there's a camera that can film and also play something inside your head, using it and engineering it with an intention of having you experience life in someone else's shoes. And so what you'll see is an incarnation of that.
We live in a world surrounded by walls, physical, political, subjective, intergroup walls. But what if we could build a door that allowed us to travel through these walls? A machine that would let us see through the eyes of the others, no matter who or where they are. That will let us feel in their shoes, moving and touching with their hands and bodies as we listen to their perspectives. We'd like to introduce the Library of Ourselves, a virtual reality station based on the Machine to Be Another that offers participants an archive of VR films recorded in first person and experienced through eyes, ears, and body. Designed as an autonomous tool that can be installed in cultural, social, and educational environments, the Library of Ourselves helps participants know more about the life of migrants from wars, climate change, or extreme poverty seeking for asylum, of communities socially vulnerable, of local Europeans facing new inhabitants, of common citizens facing everyday life, and many other stories. By combining cognitive science protocols with VR and documentary filmmaking techniques, these films can be experienced by pairs of participants who alternate between the role of user and guide, and who together can engage into a deeper reflection about the experiences. Each station also allows users to experience the body swap, in which two users swap bodies in real time. After every experience of the library of ourselves, participants can also take part in a scientific data collection, answering questions about their impressions and beliefs. This information will be used to analyze and improve the efficiency of the system in promoting empathy-related behaviors. We plan for the library of ourselves to be implemented in local institutions in order to open access to this technology to a general audience. The aim is to be a tool for a more compassionate society, in which individuals understand themselves as part of a broader humanity.
So with that, I'll just say a couple more things because I think what we want to do is get to the discussion part. So part of what you didn't see there, but is true, is that that project is a project in which one of the major goals is also to demystify the tech itself. So the communities whose stories are being told make them. And they make them by working with just a very low budget 240-degree camera, and the collective works with them over the course of anything from 2 to 5 days. And then those pieces are brought all over the world. Like in this case, some of those pieces were shown at the IMF and the World Bank meetings. There have been United Nations sessions that show them. And what we're working on right now is creating an intentional, what's called sort of a distributed network, an almost intentional neural network of the stories, which is a longer story. But it's to bring you to this major, for me, the provocation of today's question is, am I considering how to be predictive about VR, AR, XR, and all the implications of immersive technology and the future of being human? Are we discussing what we think will happen, or are we discussing what we intend to forge to have happen? And since I'm going to come at it today as a public artist, I'm going to say there's never been a more urgent time to consider that if there's a, back to Marshall McLuhan for a moment, the medium is the message. Anyone here is a student of communications theory. We know that radio is good at some things, TV is good at other things, etc. If AR, if mixed reality is already showing to be very good at something, it's making it easy for us to potentially tune in to what is in the ether already as content that's swimming all around us and is going to be interpreted by a variety of forces moving forward, whether it's through smart glass or glasses. Big rumors 2 years ago when everyone...
I'm going to cut you off shortly because then we can all talk together.
Yes, I'm just framing the...
Yeah.
Okay. 2 years ago at Sundance, Apple and Warby Parker got caught doing a lot of sort of dating, and all the people who are really looking at what's going to happen with mixed reality, everyone's always looking for when will the thing happen, when the full sort of democratization of everybody understanding the implications of this happens. And unfortunately, my provocation for today is that there's almost no money and almost no one creating and caring for those questions relative to public space. And that is going to have a tremendous amount to do with how the question of where will this be in the future. It'll have a lot to do with who is the ombudsman for public space. That's my frame.
That's amazing. All right, everyone gather down here while I do a little bit of cleanup. Not enough, but it's better anyway. All right. I'll be back in a second. All right, microphone. That's really amazing. So I think sure. All right. Since Dan has not had a chance to talk, why don't you start off? I know you've talked about ethics in in this technology. So maybe you could start there in terms of what these guys have been talking about, especially as the social implications of what Sandy's been doing.
Sure, thank you everybody who shared and listened. We're all here to learn in different ways and mirror off each other. As John alluded to, I'm doing a lot of work right now around ethics and XR, VR, whatever you want to call it. The first thing I would offer is a cautionary tale, as anybody who gets up here and tells you that they've figured it out, whether it be around art or ethics or interaction or design or monetization, is either lying or delusional. Even though I've been working in these kinds of tools for about 25, 30 years, we're always starting afresh and new. But let me jump in. Building off of what some of the people here have said, especially Aaron, I do believe that all of these new technologies essentially are additive. They are not replacements. To a first approximation, phones have not replaced TVs, TVs have not replaced paintings, paintings have not replaced sticks. We still use all of these things, and we will continue to add more and more things to our repertoire. My intent as I bring some of these tools to market is to try to make them available to more people, and also very intentionally to bring more people into the fold of actually creating the tools. Because every tool is political, every tool is a reflection of the people who make it. It's a to put it very bluntly, when decisions are made at companies as to what tools to make, those decisions are often about money and who's going to pay for things and where it's going to come from. So the more that you can be part of those decisions, and the more we can get other people into this room who are not here, the better those tools will be at reflecting not only where we want to be, but also where we don't even know yet where we want to be. I'm going to also go a little metaphysical here. You alluded to sort of the disillusionment where we are in the hype cycle with some of this stuff. That is totally true, and we've seen a lot of drying up. So the challenge I put out to all of you is to bring an element of awe back into these tools. When I came into the VR world, part of the reason I got into it is because I saw it as a transcendent form, something that could amplify my own abilities, that essentially I could jack in and take the stuff in here and put it on the screen. Obviously, we're not there yet, but there was something that brought me into it, that sense of awe, that sense of possibility, and that sense of transcendence, that I invite those of you who are empowered or can be around people who are empowered to bring back into the pursuit.
Oh, great. So I'm just adding a little bit, coming from the reason I produced this in my cultural background. I think when I talk about ethics, it's more about individual artists' responsibility and the creator's responsibility, and our thought process and tools that we can reach to stop the extracted nature of a lot of platforms. I think that's actually ultimately is going to hurt artists, because if you draw a circle, the way artists create is organic way to create an art, and then publish and share workflow, and then share workflow among each other, and to collaborate, and ultimately come back to a final product. Now, what is happening is you have an organic idea, but the platform extracts the workflow, and the platform extracts the collaboration of workflow, and the platform extracts the result of your art. And it stops us from going back and to benefit from all the work we put in there. So we just need to be mindful of this is happening, and to push and advocate for our own right as artists.
Yeah, I want to amplify that and just say two things. I think that last year I was on one of those NEA panels, which is an incredible experience because you read 120 applications from around the country. And the worst thing about it is that 119 of them should have been funded. There was only one where it was really clear they just really weren't quite ready, and they should have been supported to get ready. All of the work should have happened, back to additive. Because I don't think, I'll just say, I don't think we're missing a sense of awe. I think the problem is that the number one conversation at the NEA panel was this ongoing anger between artists and technology companies, because we're in this bizarre notion that somehow what's going to happen has to happen kind of in relationship with tech companies. And I just couldn't disagree more. I think that tech companies serve a shareholder god. That's their god. At the end of the day, they're gonna do cool things under that rubric because they do sell things to people, and they're gonna say lots of nice things about how they believe in creativity and art, and that's fine. But sometimes art's supposed to really piss you off and break things and save the world, and I can assure you that a shareholder-held company may or may not enjoy supporting people to use their tools to see the entire paradigm of the economy differently, which is what I actually think it's best at. The fact is, we have an unthinkably fast imagination machine with everything you just saw today. If you add up what Janet said about the fact that we are the data is us, our value is us, at the same time that data breaks basic economics, supply-side economics are broken with data. If people who say data is the new crude oil, which in some ways it is, back to your point of extraction, but right now we have endless data, endless photography, endless potential, which all should add up to endless value. And that should mean that what mixed reality is best at is making us able to rapid fire simulations of solutions to all of our predicaments. But that's not the majority of what tech companies have invested in. The few artists in residence who have those jobs for a while, one of whom I just met with at UCLA, she was in one of the most premier, wonderful VR positions in Google, but now she works for the Department of Defense, because that wasn't an ongoing investment. So for me, it's not about whether or not Google or Facebook or HTC or any company is doing the right thing. It's that we're not invested enough on the fair fight side of it, on the public language here, on the public's relationship to those technologies. Because I think we'd have all the sense of awe and wonder that we need as long as we truly distribute power and resources in making those things.
I just, I'm a Buddhism, so I'm going to offset that intensity a little bit. I think ultimately, from my perspective, I would like artists to be at a place where it's a choice to use technology or use the organic matter. But you need to have equipped with the freedom to use either. I chose to use organic matter inside of technology.
I'm going to challenge a question. What do you do with the fact that the company making the devices that you make your work with are retinal tracking and heat mapping someone's desires? Are you able to control that as a practitioner and someone wanting to engage an audience in that?
Maybe by then. It's confident.
So companies are by definition sociopathic beasts. Let's just assume that, because they're self-preservation and they don't necessarily serve the body politic or civil society. That said, companies are made of humans still today. They're made of humans, and humans are people, and humans, eat and go to the bathroom and have kids and do these sorts of things and fight with traffic, and we are all on our journeys. And I invite you to embrace contradiction, that while that is true that companies and corporations are sociopathic, they are also made of people who, to a first approximation, are trying to do the right thing. And sometimes there are small beacons of light there that you can find and you can try to focus on. If we go full Black Mirror, that I find that has a very clenching and stultifying effect on creativity. Instead, we need to find hope where we can. And we are, even inside the beast, we are trying to do good things, whether that be amplified creativity that comes from multiple sources, or the kinds of work I do around ethics and actually writing documents that live beyond me, that don't have my name on them, but that have inclusive language around diversity, around inclusion in the technology, around having language that centers around community norms, that centers around ways of understanding where red lines are around social VR and content. Those kinds of efforts do make a difference, and language is very important, and I want people to still tear down the walls, and I want people to still throw bricks through windows. At the same time, building on the Buddhist notion of contradiction, that is true, and there are people on the inside who are trying to fight the good fight at the same time with the tools of I don't want to trivialize these terms, but the tools of the master, the tools of capitalism. Both can be true at the same time.
So to answer Sandy's question, and John, you put together a great panel because you have a balance of mini society right here. You have artivists, right? So artists who are activists, I see you as artist and a kind of art creative technologist kind of business mindset as well. Dan comes from hardware, so right? Are you define that? You sculptor art, yeah. So okay, so this is a great kind of a case to one is to push the boundary of VR AR technology, and second is how to do the right thing in the process. So to your question, what about eye tracking, brainwave tracking, all those kind of stuff? I've been looking a lot into that. I thought that can be integrated into a VR experience in a very interesting way. Eye tracking, for example, if I would like to engage one of the lanterns that's coming towards me with my eye tracking, and that lantern can become alive, and that can wave at you, dance around you. We're not able to do it right now. And it's a very intuitive way of engaging elements in a virtual space. Brainwave tracking, so there are sensors you can put on your forehead and you can actually start to read data from your brain. I thought that's great because I would love to know people went through this lantern experience, how they actually go through, visualize their calmness. And it's a great tool for people to understand their power of the power of art, how art can impact them. So, but in terms of if the hardware is going to upload that user's data to the cloud and make use of other things, that's more of a question for Dan.
I don't want to take too much space, but I'm not going to reassure you, but I will tell you that people like me are explicitly meeting with the lawyers, meeting with the privacy boards. We are putting language into the documents this week, last week, about eye tracking data, about other affective signals, whether it be emotion, attention, engagement, and where those signals go and how you inform the user. And I'm not talking about terms of service, but how you inform people in intuitive ways that are natural as to if you want to do this kind of experience, this is what has to happen with the data. If you don't want that to happen with the data, then you don't get this kind of an experience. So that it's more of a conversation and essentially a contract. So I can speak for my company, I can speak for Oculus, I can speak for Google and Microsoft because we are at these trade meetings. And we are, to a first approximation, trying to understand where the zeitgeist is around what community wants with these kinds of data and what not to do with them.
I want to go somewhere else just briefly. When I did your machine to be another a long time ago, a couple years, and the addition of having a live person actually give you things, touch you, to simulate the experience from another is, I think, the potential there is really amazing, and yet it's limited because you have to have someone on site doing it for you. Are there ways to possibly figure out ways to do that without the person? Has anyone been looking at that? And I'm not sure what it would be. It could be a glove, it could be any number of technologies.
Sure. So what John's asking about, if everyone's familiar with the word haptics, there are many devices now that are being made that give you different kinds of haptic sensations that play concurrently with what's happening in your ears, in your head, in your eyes. And there are many experiences outside of the machine to be another. There are all kinds of people making experiences now, some of which make you feel like you're flying. There are all kinds of wonderful experiences. I think there is a tremendous amount of a sense of awe. It's just, there is really and truly such a small amount of the research being done in fields outside of basically right now the use of VR for either building, I can talk about all the benign uses of it. One of the reasons I love Jude's piece so much is it's very rare to have a first-person piece that uses controllers that's not about either shooting something, slashing something, sometimes building something. But the use of your digits in virtual spaces, if you were to do, somebody must have done a study on this. I would love the algorithm to give me the answer. the percentage has got to be over 90 that you are doing something, your agency is to create an act of violence. That is an outrageous truth about the early days of this language. So for us, a lot of it is to get people into headsets to just even begin to imagine that these near field devices could be engineered for the intention of your additional connection to another person or additional sensation of being someone who you're not. So I've seen really effective work done in people who have different ranges of bodily abilities and ways in which swapping bodies with that person can be extremely effective. But one of the really low budget things that we've done, because part of this project is also about, like right now, the number of people who get to work in these fields is so tiny in the world of the population. So some of this is about taking this stuff that is mobile and really cheap cameras and really getting this language to be driven by people who are typically not getting a chance to drive this language. So sometimes it's as simple as doing a better job of us laying out that two people could come into the situation not knowing it at all and figure out how to do an order of operations instructions that really frees it up for people who don't have tons of money. So that's as good a solution, honestly. Like the technology of good human order of operations can be as good as, oh, I have a whole haptic glove that costs $500,000. Those things are amazing and they're all coming. It's not, to my mind, whether a company does it or an artist does it. It's that artists have to be doing it. None of those things aren't going to be made. Retinal tracking and heat mapping, they're here. It's that more people who, and I'm using the word artist, I appreciate that Aaron really defined terms so well. I'm using the word public, I'm talking about public artists right now specifically, that especially as we're about to have so much of the data flying around the ether interpreted by near field devices, I'm making a plea for more public artists to be in that space, specifically.
So when you talk about operation of an actual VR experience, it is really a friction right now. I do think that the way we think about it is like when elevator was just invented, there was always someone operate the elevator for you. But now we don't have that role anymore. So it was just a work in progress. It is unfair for any company to come up with a very operational heavy product to fit the gap. I don't know how long this gap is going to be from semi-automatic to fully self-assisted, partially assisted to fully self-service VR experience, maybe 5 to 10 years. So it's not a smart investment to come up with a company or operations for that. I would say peer-to-peer model is really great. Community-driven model is really great. Like someone in Barcelona can help me do the mentoring experience, and I can help them to do the experience in Seattle. So.
I'm gonna push back a little bit on the premise of your question, John, which is how can we, you're essentially saying how do you make it more efficient? How do you get these people out of it? How can we scale it? Part of the reason I love that piece was that it required 2 people.
Yeah.
If anything, my beef with a lot of the tech we have now is that it makes it too easy to disengage from the moment, from the human, from the unpredictability of if I move my hand here, I don't know if this is freaking you out. I don't know if I'm in your space. But having to grapple with that as an artist and as a creator is really important. My beef to narrow it down is that that I can check out super quickly, whether it be my phone, whether it be AR glasses, prevents me from sitting with discomfort, prevents me from interacting with people who are different from me, and prevents me from then creating community or helping to contribute to community. So that required 2 people who may not know each other, that there is a degree of trust that has to be built, and it's a continuum, I think, is part of the joy around that, and I love that. So thank you.
And just to follow on to that, the question I posed when I wrote you guys was the idea of AR becoming so immersive that it's almost like VR, but without the dislocation of VR. One of the problems with VR is sometimes people get dizzy because they don't know where they are, or they bounce into somebody. But that sense of the ability to immerse is so powerful. Are we moving toward any kind of a sense where you can immerse just walking down the street? Where suddenly the streetscape becomes, I saw that that one piece where the streetscape became drawings, or the streetscape becomes 1924 or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, one of the reasons that I think there's so much excitement in mixed reality is, first of all, it's already sitting there. So if you pull up a mobile device and you simply, I mean, the GPS is the most obvious understanding of intervening with a mobile device in your reality and using it as a constant. I already saw a demo of a car with smart glass, and your whole interface of that is in the windshield. So it will be very common very soon that a green arrow will turn for you inside your windshield while you're driving, and there's a variety of uses of smart glass that you can imagine quickly, right? But I think as soon as it's a pair of regular, unencumbered prescription-style glasses, and I already got to demo, Bose did a set of, the arms on your glasses are extraordinary spatial speakers that play sort of just for you. Which is remarkable. That, someone was talking earlier, I forget, it was maybe Michael, the first talk of the day, stereoscopic photography, giving you that sense as a mammal of where you are in space. The sound does it even more quickly, even more effectively places you in space. So as you're walking down the street, it could either be a Minority Report version of the world in which you're simply being push advertised to, and you're being, every streak of data you saw earlier is all recorded, and it could all feel very dystopic, and I agree, psychologically we can't afford that dystopia. But the really important thing I hope that we can imagine is that conversely, there are all of the history of a place could be laid as a palimpsest upon that place. If you are vetting what that is, if you're curating it, if you're creating it, if you're making sure that you're going to a place that has structurally been stolen from people, and you're going back to retell the story of the Red Line District of Seattle, you could walk through that neighborhood and have that be what's in your mixed reality. You could see that street corner on Jackson and 23rd that is now an enormous new development. It could be an R&B club in the 1940s again. That is certainly one of the excitements. To me, an even more exciting thing about it is that you could choose which channels of data to train upon solutions. Imagine transportation solutions that if only people could see them, maybe they'd believe them. One of the hardest things in the world is to get people to get out of single occupancy cars, but if they could stand in the middle of Rainier and see that taken back for their neighborhood and live it, maybe we'd have the political will to do it. So if we have quantum computing, that level of data, extraordinary near-field devices, that is one of humans' best evolution tools for a rapid-fire imagination machine about how to make change at a pace we don't have time to do in the real world. And that's why the mixing of the real world and the story of that data could and should be an amazing catalyst.
I would say I'm big on advocating it's a choice as a maker. So it's really about whether that makes sense for the story to be told more immersive way. You want sometimes to deliberately put the user in an isolated physical environment so that your story can be told and you can put the user in a very therapeutic environment, right? So I think AR is more augmenting the physical world in front of you. So if I'm doing national park scavenger hunt game, I would love to use AR. So it's more of a choice rather than, I don't know, what would John, we were just talking about the consequence. It's not, it's more about the choice.
As I mentioned at the beginning, often our intuition about what's right or what will work is wrong with some of these immersive technologies. I can't give you the citation, but there was a very obvious work people did with VR, AR to see sea level rise, and they did the right thing. They went out to communities to do charrettes, and this was connected to the Duwamish, and they were showing people, well, you know, based on the sea level rise, don't you want to change, you know, how we do things and how we lay things out? And it turned out actually when you put people in this and they could see the sea level superimposed in their actual environment, they said, doesn't seem that big of a deal. So we have to be very cautious. If I walk down 23rd and I start seeing the past, there's a danger that we can trivialize the past, that the past becomes just another feed and that everything we see around us loses the reality, loses the impact. It makes an intuitive statement that, yeah, I can go back there and I will be able to walk in someone else's shoes and I will feel that, and I succeed or I win as an artist. I just caution that sometimes, again, that can trivialize things, and that no matter how close you get to that representation, you are absolutely not walking in that person's shoes. You are absolutely not experiencing what they're experiencing. You can get close maybe, but sometimes you can actually have the opposite effect on a populace. Sometimes there's a value of getting people to encounter a work through another more abstracted medium like words or conversation or having a meal with somebody or first doing research before you go into the environment and see all this gee whiz stuff superimposed. As much as I love tech, I also worry about the danger of which cognitive system you're engaging as you're in those environments. And if I'm going around and I'm seeing this old club, but I'm also thinking about my grocery list and I'm also thinking about these other things, you as an artist cannot you can't control the experience that someone's having, and you may not get to where you want to. And there's a delight in that, but there's also a danger in that.
I like what you're saying, yeah. Just to kind of re-elaborate what I learned from you just now and share with the audience. I do think that there was at one point, even for myself, it was VR, AR, it was such a shiny new toy, and I wanted to apply it to everything I see. That is actually a very dangerous mindset. I'm glad that I'm no longer thinking about that. I am more distilled, and I hope that everybody else has this journey as well.
Yeah, I'll just add to that. Of course, I think of course there are all kinds of ways that as we interact with mobile devices, there are more than dangers that have unfolded. I'll absolutely confess, I know a bunch of us are in this audience, I spent way too much of the 90s selling artists on, Robin, it's your fault, selling artists on writing HTML and making sure they understood the language as language, because artists knowing that language mattered. I still believe that, but my exuberant belief in the internet for connection is obviously, that doesn't always go so well. So of course, the cautionary tale is key, but to me, it's all about more people playing in that world. I'm less worried about 100 oral history augmented reality stories than I am about the ways in which it's already being a done deal. The negotiations, we're not talking about potential problems. Read tonight about Google's Sidewalk Labs project in Toronto. Just look and think. To me, I'm less worried about citizen-based and artist-based public art that looks at this tech, and then whatever the disaffected outcomes of that are, we'll handle those. We have the metabolism for that. But the metabolism for things that are driven by billions of dollars is another conversation. So I guess to me it's a little bit splitting hairs where I don't think the crux of the argument is.
I was thinking, somebody asked me yesterday what I thought the new trends and technologies were in art, and I mentioned the Turner Prize. Did you all hear about that? Turner Prize is awarded in England for an artist basically doing something that is a contribution to Great Britain. And there were 4 people who were nominated. And they all got together and wrote the selection committee and said, look, why don't you just award the prize to all of us and we'll split it. And everybody, according to the press accounts, the selection committee said, of course, it's a perfect idea. You'll get 10,000 pounds, you'll get 40,000 pounds. But apparently the method for doing that was these 4 artists getting together in a way that probably would have not happened before the internet. And I can see ways of the technologies that allow people to communicate in different and interesting ways, creating new options for that kind of connection. So, do we have any questions from the audience?
Wow. I heard a lot of audible stuff in this front room.
Well, yeah.
Is anyone able to speak about what efforts are being made in terms of making the field more accessible or the equipment more accessible?
Great question.
Thank you. So when I came up in the tech world, a few decades ago, this stuff was horribly expensive and was only at fancy universities and industrial places. You can get an Oculus Quest for $300. That's a fair amount of money, but it is in the impulse bar for middle income, or what we used to call middle income people. There used to be places like Commotion Lab where you could go and use these things. In terms of the software, it's all free. Like Unity, Unreal, all that stuff is free. The only limitation people have these days in terms of the software and the digital is energy. How much energy do you have? Can you stay up late even if you're working other jobs and learn this stuff? So that's all accessible. If you need access to the hardware, come talk to me. If you're from an underrepresented group, I will throw lots of hardware at you, happily. My job is to get out of the way so that other people can make things. It is all possible, definitely. How you amplify that work and how you get an audience and followers and all that other stuff, that's your problem, but I'm happy to help in any way I can.
Thank you for helping in that way.
Yeah,
That's really cool.
all of that for sure, yeah.
I'm wondering if For Culture or are there any other grants in town that can specifically fund VR as a kind of...
For Culture does an art and tech grant every year, and that's great. So certainly there are a whole lot of nonprofit and cultural organizations that are trying. So I'll say, I guess I look at access as, there's sort of, well, there's lots to say, but there's three kinds of access. There's equipment, and there are the Northwest Film Forum where we sit, and I'm happy to say I'm on the board here, and I really believe very much in this organization for many reasons, not the least of which is here we are. There is some gear here. Local sightings this year, actually people would have had a chance to come and experience Jude's work during the local sightings film festival this year. And my understanding is during the By Design festival this year in March, we're also going to have emergent technology as part of that. So access certainly part of its gear. Several grants in town do exist. But we, for the size of our ecosystem and the need for our artists and practitioners locally to participate, it's not very much, okay? The next part of access is whether or not you've even had any education where the base language is translated. So like when you're seeing some of the AR pieces, the reason I was gonna show you that Apple piece is that you're talking about artists like Pipolati Rist, artists who've been around forever, whose work is in the language of immersive, and having the translation from that into some new technologies. A lot of the community college programs that used to exist that spent more time on the art part of tech are gone. So I don't want to be falsely positive about something. The programs stay open that are about training you for a skill, for a job. But if they're about having that as your language to recreate, to go out and redo it, yeah, there are a few left, but not as many as there used to be. And a lot of the university dollars that are being spent in this space are public dollars, but they're being spent on private gain research. So that's a second part of access that's really critical. And the third part I'll just say is that, I think Janet did a great job of showing the human story as a beautiful, in some ways, data story. But the reason I'm so hot on MR, the access of understanding that data through mixed reality means that we could see this thing, this substrate that's being considered so valuable by everyone, as ours again. So the third key to access in my book is that we do something like the GDPR, which is an EU data law. Now it's greatly flawed, but good news, they already did it. We can learn from what they did. They started at city levels. If I'm not mistaken, somebody here may know, I think Berlin did it first. There's no reason in my book why Seattle doesn't try a referendum for a GDPR-style data law so that every company that wants to take that has to renegotiate, which means lots of resources could potentially be in this space so that that language and that equipment, that access to public investment in it might turn around.
Thank you, guys. One more question. Do we have another one? Yeah, Larry.
Yeah, a couple things just came up. I know this is about technology and art, but two things that just came up kind of make me wonder how much social science is involved with this. Like your observation, John, about the artists communicating to bundle their prize, and then the rise of the Duwamish example. I think the way more germane thing in that scenario is like the tens of thousands of climate refugees that are already here because the water has gone up that much. So I'm just curious, like how broad the the curiosity about this has become.
Do you mean how broad the curiosity of?
Well, just
so do you mean how
like
broad
the-
is the curiosity of whether, you know, there are a lot of dystopian stories and that those haven't seemed to create
No, I just mean
much
the
reaction?
people part of it beyond the individual immersion, I guess. Yeah.
There, actually, my Barcelona colleagues are, they, even though I don't want to romanticize the EU, they all still have jobs and they all still get paid in ways that is very difficult to get paid in the US for doing really radical and out there research. Three of them have really big, who are in Amsterdam right now, have really big social science contracts, and they're actually studying whether or not doing these stories can actually test, you can test out having overcome implicit bias in policing. We're working with them right now on, well, you know, implicit bias training like is always, or is dangerously often a keyword for white people who are saying, I suddenly recognize that my police force needs something, I'm gonna throw a training at them. I'm not talking about that, I'm talking about this is like a 3-year, very in-depth study of whether or not you can actually use these technologies towards shifting implicit bias. So I do know there are some real research dollars on the social science part of this, and most of the studies I know about in the US are a little bit problematic because they're either only industry funded or only Department of Defense funded. Again, there's some interesting stuff there, but not as much necessarily in the social realm. But if someone may know more.
It's a good question. It's very important for the success of the VR industry because it is really about bringing a technology that the general public understands and can relate to themselves. So I would say the best way to approach this is when you create a project, really engage the subject matter expert in that field. So if it's about health product, make sure you talk to therapists and doctors and nurses. And when I'm doing Silk Road project research, I actually talk to professors who were teaching Silk Road. So with that, not only it's in a collaborative process, but also it's the engagement from day one. And it's your usability study from day one too.
I have nothing to add.
All right. On that note, we're going to close the session.